Next today, here in Washington, D.C., former US Vice-President Mike Pence says he'll consider testifying before the January 6th House Select Committee if invited to do so.
If there was an invitation to participate, I would consider it, but you've heard me mention the Constitution a few times this morning. On the Constitution, we have three co-equal branches of government. And any invitation to be directed to me, I would have to reflect on the unique role that I was serving in as Vice President. It'd be unprecedented in history for a Vice President to be summoned to testify on Capitol Hill. But as I said, I don't want to prejudge. If there's ever any formal invitation rendered to us, we'd give it due consideration.
Many of former Vice President Mike Pence's aides have already testified in front of that House Select Committee investigating the Capitol Hill riot on January 6th last year. On several occasions, Mr. Pence has said he believes Donald Trump was wrong to think that the Vice President had the power to reverse the election outcome. So far, the Congressional Committee has not publicly extended an invitation or subpoena to Mr. Pence. It is unprecedented in US history for a Vice President to be summoned to testify on Capitol Hill in this context. Our US correspondent Susan Tehrani is joining us live from New York City. Susan, Mike Pence is of course laying the groundwork for a potential presidential run himself in 2024. Would an appearance in front of this committee likely help or hinder his prospects?
You know, this January 6th committee sort of seems like a curse right now for the Republican Party. It really is something that perhaps those have already made up their mind regarding Donald Trump and January 6th. You know, see it as a referendum on the former president. But it's hard to believe that a character that's so reserved and conservative like Mike Pence would actually put himself out there and associate himself with this panel. And many believe, at least those close to him, that because, as you mentioned, for example, his former chief of staff and his lawyers have already cooperated fully and testified to this committee, there isn't really much more to share on the part of the former vice president. Beyond perhaps the optics. And I think the January 6th committee knows that they probably can't get the former vice president to come and testify publicly. I mean, it would be to the benefit of the committee more than it would be to Mike Pence's. And on the other hand, I think Mike Pence was giving a conservative answer in saying that he would give it, quote unquote, due consideration, and then talking about those executive privilege issues and consideration as being a former vice president that he had to, you know, think about. So, you know, it's highly unlikely, and there hasn't been a formal invitation until now. But as you mentioned, he was making those comments at in New Hampshire, a popular stop where candidates really make, you know, comments and appearances if they are thinking about running for office.
And you spoke just before about that committee almost being a poisoned chalice for Republicans. Think of the fact that its chairperson, Liz Cheney, recently lost her primary in the state of Wyoming. Where does that leave the committee and also its ongoing investigation into those events on January 6th and the role that Donald Trump had to play in them?
Yeah, you know, at this point, the January 6th committee will probably continue its sort of show trial until the midterm elections because it wants to focus on Donald Trump. The Democrats don't mind that, considering the fact that, you know, it will put the spotlight on Donald Trump on the one hand. But on the other hand, you know, if the committee is able to come up with substantial evidence and really a bombshell, then it would probably put the former president at a disadvantage. However, because it's taken so long and because of what happened to Liz Cheney, you know, the skepticism is very high. right now at this point. And attention has been deviated from the January 6th committee to now this Mar-a-Lago issue, the search and seizure of Donald Trump's home. So, you know, it's sort of lost its pizzazz, if you may. But it will continue. It will continue until November. It will try to garner as much attention as it can. But unfortunately, because there is no cross-examination on the part of the Republicans, it doesn't really have the, it's not a viable platform for it to be taken seriously, at least on the part of the Republican Party and many independents.
Susan, thank you for that update. Susan Tehrani in New York City. And of course, we'll keep a close eye on both that committee and any word from Mike Pence's potential presidential campaign.